There are things you do that you have never chosen to do. Not habits, exactly, though they look like habits from the outside. Not character flaws, though the people who have been hurt by them have sometimes called them that. Not weaknesses or failures or evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you, though you have probably, at various points in your life, suspected all of those things. They are adaptations, strategies that were built in the earliest period of your life by a nervous system that was trying to survive an environment it had no power to change. And the remarkable thing about them, the thing that Jung spent decades documenting, is that they continue to operate with extraordinary precision and extraordinary cost long after the environment that created them has ceased to exist. You carry them into every relationship, every workplace, every moment of potential intimacy or conflict or joy. They activate before conscious thought. They produce consequences you didn't intend. They have been mistaken by you and by others for your personality, when in fact they are something far older and far more specific than personality. They are the fingerprints of what happened to you before you had the language to name it. Jung was not sentimental about this. He did not believe that understanding your childhood adaptations would make them disappear, or that naming the wound would automatically close it. What he believed, with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years sitting across from the consequences, was that these adaptations could not be released until they were seen. Clearly, specifically, without the distortion of shame or the interference of self-protection. And here is what makes this video different from every other conversation about childhood wounds you have encountered. I am not going to tell you that what happened to you wasn't your fault. You probably know that already, at least intellectually. I am not going to tell you to forgive or to heal or to do the work or any of the other phrases that have become so overused that they have lost the weight they need to carry. I am going to show you exactly what the adaptations look like, specifically in behavior, in relationship patterns, in the interior experience that most people have never been given the precise language to describe. And when you see them described that clearly, something will happen that is more useful than anything else I could offer you. You will recognize yourself. And in that recognition, which Jung called making the unconscious conscious, the adaptation will, for the first time, be outside you enough to examine. But before I show you the first one, I need to tell you something about what childhood actually does to the nervous system. Because without understanding the mechanism, the behaviors look random. And they are not random. The human nervous system is not designed the way most people assume it is. It is not a neutral recording device that captures experience and stores it for later reference. It is a prediction machine. Its primary function is not to process the present moment, but to predict what the present moment is about to become, and to prepare the body for that prediction before the threat or reward actually arrives. This prediction system is built from experience. Every time a certain type of situation occurs, and a certain type of outcome follows, the nervous system logs the pattern. The next time anything resembling that situation appears, even distantly, even partially, the system activates the preparation that the original experience established as appropriate. In an adult with a stable childhood, this system is calibrated to a range of experiences broad enough to produce reasonably accurate predictions. It has been taught, through repeated exposure to environments that were basically safe and basically responsive, that uncertainty is usually manageable, that conflict usually resolves, that care is usually reliable, that the self is usually secure enough to tolerate what comes. In a child who grew up in an environment where any of those things were not true, where uncertainty was genuinely dangerous, where conflict escalated unpredictably, where care was inconsistent or conditional or absent, where the self was made to feel fundamentally insecure, the prediction system is calibrated differently. It is calibrated to threat, to vigilance, to the specific survival strategies that produce safety in the original environment. And then the child grows up, and the environments change, and the nervous system does not receive this information. It continues to predict and to prepare and to activate the original survival strategies in situations that bear even a superficial resemblance to the original ones. This is not weakness. This is the design. The nervous system learned its lessons extraordinarily well. The problem is not that it learned badly. The problem is that it cannot unlearn on its own. It cannot distinguish between a situation that is genuinely dangerous and a situation that merely resembles, in some structural way, the situations that were dangerous before. And so, the behaviors continue, automatic, invisible to the person performing them, confusing to everyone around them, costing year after year in ways that seem inexplicable, until someone shows you what to look for. Here is the first one, and I want you to pay close attention, because what I am about to describe may feel like it is describing someone else. That is usually how it feels when we first encounter our own adaptations from outside. The first thing people who were broken in childhood do without realizing it is this. They read the room before they read themselves. Before they know what they feel, they know what the room feels. Before they have checked in with their own interior state, they have already assessed the emotional temperature of every person present, identified the potential sources of disruption, calculated what version of themselves is most likely to keep the atmosphere stable, and begun presenting that version. This happens in milliseconds. The person has no awareness that it is occurring. It predates any conscious decision. By the time they walk through the door, they have already disappeared into the assessment of what the room requires. Jung called this hypervigilance of the relational field, the overdeveloped capacity to read the emotional states of others at the expense of contact with one's own. It is almost universally present in people who grew up in emotionally unpredictable or unsafe environments. Because in those environments, reading the room was survival. Knowing what the adults in your life were feeling before they expressed it gave you precious seconds to adjust, to disappear, to soften, to become whatever configuration would keep the danger from arriving. But here is what it costs in adulthood. The person who is always reading the room is never fully in it. They are always slightly outside, monitoring, assessing, managing. Their relationships feel to them like continuous navigation rather than genuine contact. They are exhausted in ways they cannot explain, because the monitoring is invisible and incessant, and they have a very specific, very confusing experience in intimate relationships. They know their partner's emotional state with great precision, but frequently have no idea what they themselves are feeling. The room has taken up all the space. Before we go further, and I promise what comes next will explain something about yourself that may have been confusing you for years, I want to ask you something. Write in the comments right now. Have you ever been the person in the room who knew what everyone else was feeling before they said a word, while having almost no idea what you yourself were feeling? If that's you, just write the number 1 in the comments. 1 number, that's all. Because I want to show you how many people in this comment section grew up learning to read rooms instead of themselves. And what you'll see there may be the first time you felt genuinely not alone in this. The second thing, and this one is going to require a moment of honest self-examination, because it is one of the most common adaptations, and the one most frequently mistaken for virtue. People who were broken in childhood become extraordinarily useful, not occasionally helpful, not normally generous, extraordinarily, compulsively, exhaustingly useful, in ways that cost them things they cannot afford to lose, and that they give away anyway because the alternative feels, at a physiological level, like danger. They are the ones who notice what needs to be done before anyone asks, who take on the responsibility that everyone else has quietly declined, who remain available to the needs of others at the precise points when their own needs are most urgent, who feel when they are not being useful a restlessness that is indistinguishable from guilt. This is not generosity. I want to be precise about this, because the people who carry this adaptation have been told their whole lives that their self-sacrificing helpfulness is their best quality, and that framing is one of the things that makes the adaptation so difficult to examine. Genuine generosity comes from surplus. It is the overflow of a person who has enough and chooses to share it. The compulsive usefulness of the childhood wounded person comes from deficit, from the deeply established nervous system conviction that their presence is only justified by their function, that they are safe only as long as they are needed, that the moment they stop being useful, the connection they depend on will evaporate. This conviction was not invented, it was learned. In a family system where emotional caretaking of adults was required from the child, where love was conditional on performance, where the child's own needs were consistently deprioritized in favor of the system's stability. In those environments, becoming useful was survival. Stopping was not an option. And now the child is an adult, and they still cannot stop. The third adaptation, and this is the one that has probably created the most confusion and the most pain in your relationships, is coming. But first, I want to make sure you understand something about why these patterns are so resistant to change. Because without that understanding, what I'm about to describe will simply make you feel worse about yourself. And that is not the point. The reason these adaptations resist change is not because you are weak, or not trying hard enough, or haven't done enough work on yourself. The reason is structural. The adaptations were built at a developmental stage when the psyche's primary organizing principle was not truth, but safety. They were not constructed as theories. They were constructed as survival mechanisms, and they were reinforced by every moment in which they worked, every moment in which reading the room prevented a confrontation, every moment in which being useful maintained a connection, every moment in which the strategy produced the safety it was designed to produce. The nervous system does not change based on insight alone. Understanding why you do something does not immediately stop you from doing it. What changes the nervous system is repeated new experience, experiences that demonstrate, gradually, over time, that the prediction the system is making is incorrect, that the absence of hypervigilance does not produce the danger that absence once produced, that stopping being useful does not result in the abandonment the system anticipates. This is why Jung emphasized that psychological change is not a matter of understanding, but of experience. It happens in relationship, not in books, not in videos, not even in the purest and most accurate self-understanding, though self-understanding creates the preconditions. It happens when the actual prediction is tested and found to be inaccurate. When you stop reading the room and nothing catastrophic occurs. When you stop being useful and the connection holds. This is not fast, it is not comfortable. But knowing precisely what is operating makes it possible to begin. Now, the third adaptation. The third thing people who were broken in childhood do without realizing it is this. They treat intimacy like a test they might fail at any moment. Not consciously. They want intimacy. They want deep, genuine connection. They often describe it as the thing they want most. But beneath the wanting, running beneath every moment of closeness, is a prediction that intimacy is not safe, that it will end, that the closer someone gets, the more opportunity they have to find the thing that will make them leave. And this prediction produces behaviors that are almost perfectly designed to test whether it is true. The person who grew up being broken will do one of two things in intimate relationships, sometimes alternating between both. They will either become so vigilant and so accommodating, so perfectly attuned to their partner's needs, that they essentially disappear into the relationship and wait, with quiet dread, for the moment the partner realizes they want someone more real. Or they will create distance. Not consciously, they will find reasons, good reasons, reasonable reasons, understandable reasons, to interrupt moments of closeness at the exact moment they become most genuine. A subject change at the moment of real vulnerability, a withdrawal at the moment of greatest warmth, an argument constructed with unconscious precision at the exact moment when the intimacy is becoming the most real it has ever been. Jung called this the fear of the good object, the deeply counterintuitive terror of genuine love in people who grew up in environments where love was consistently paired with danger, loss, or disappointment. The nervous system that was shaped by that pairing does not simply welcome genuine warmth when it arrives. It identifies the warmth as the precursor to the inevitable loss and begins its preparatory response immediately. The result is that the people these individuals love most are often the ones they find most difficult to be with. The relationships they want most are the ones they are most likely to damage. Not because they want to damage them, because the prediction of damage is so deeply embedded that every moment of genuine closeness activates the system that was designed to protect them from what felt like the inevitable aftermath of closeness. The fourth thing, and this one I want you to listen to very carefully because it is the one that most frequently goes unnamed. People who were broken in childhood are at war with their own needs, not occasionally conflicted, at war, in a state of ongoing, exhausting underground hostility toward the fact that they have needs at all. Their needs feel, to them, like evidence of weakness, like threats to their relationships, like things that, if expressed, will either burden the people they love or reveal something about them that will finally cause those people to leave. And so they manage their needs the way you manage something dangerous, by minimizing them, concealing them, meeting them in secret, and experiencing a complicated mixture of shame and anger every time a need becomes unavoidable. This is the most invisible of the adaptations because it operates entirely internally. From the outside, the person often looks remarkably self-sufficient. They do not ask for much. They manage their own difficulties. They rarely complain. They are, as the people around them frequently observe, very low maintenance. What is not visible is the interior cost of the continuous self-management, the chronic, low-grade tension of someone who is always monitoring their own needs to make sure none of them become inconvenient, the specific grief of the person who, when asked what they want or need, genuinely does not know, because the process of accessing genuine need has been suppressed so long and so thoroughly that the connection to it has become damaged. Jung called this the pathology of self-sufficiency, and he observed that it was almost universally present in people who grew up in environments where expressing need produced one of three responses: punishment, neglect, or the visible burden of distressing the person who was supposed to meet the need. A child who learns that needing produces punishment stops expressing needs. A child who learns that needing produces neglect stops expecting needs to be met. A child who learns that their need visibly distresses their caregiver, who carries an expression of burden or overwhelm when asked for something, learns something even more specific and more damaging: that their needs are inherently too much, that they are, in the simple fact of having needs, already too much for the people they depend on. There is one more, and I have saved it for last because it is the one that most directly produces the experience of feeling like there is something permanently, essentially wrong with you, which is why it needs to be named with the most precision. The fifth thing people who were broken in childhood do without realizing it is this: they feel responsible for things they did not cause. Someone is upset in the room before the figure has asked any questions, before the matter has been addressed to them in any way. They are already scanning their own recent behavior to identify what they did wrong. Someone gives them feedback about something unrelated to their character, and they receive it as a verdict on who they are. A relationship ends or fails or becomes difficult, and they construct, with a thoroughness that would be impressive if it weren't so painful, a comprehensive account of their own fault in the matter. This is not conscientiousness. It is not humility. It is a very specific nervous system pattern called hyper-responsibility, the tendency of the person who grew up in a chaotic or unpredictable environment to assume automatically that the chaos is their fault and their responsibility to resolve. Because in that environment, it often was. Not objectively, the child is never actually responsible for the emotional states of the adults around them. But experientially, the child who lived with a depressed parent and learned to manage their own behavior carefully in order to prevent the depression from worsening was being taught, through direct experience, that they had causal power over the emotional reality of others. The child who grew up in a volatile household and discovered that a certain kind of self-presentation could de-escalate the volatility was being taught that they could influence outcomes through careful management of themselves. This is a form of magical thinking, and it is adaptive. The child who believes they have causal power over their environment has more reason to try to influence it than the child who believes themselves powerless. The illusion of control in an environment of genuine uncontrollability is psychologically protective, but the adult carries the illusion forward into relationships where they have no actual causal power over the other person's emotions, into workplaces where they take on responsibility for dynamics that do not belong to them, into the interior, carrying a quiet, persistent, exhausting conviction that if something is wrong somewhere in their vicinity, it is probably their fault. And if it is their fault, it is their responsibility to fix. This is the wound that produces the most confusion and the most unnecessary suffering, because it is a wound that looks, from outside, like virtue, like caring, like conscientiousness, and the person carrying it often cannot tell where genuine responsibility ends and the nervous system's ancient and inaccurate guilt begins. Here is what Jung believed about all of this, about these 5 adaptations and the dozens more that he documented across a lifetime of clinical work. He believed they were not weaknesses. He believed they were intelligence, the most precise and loyal form of intelligence available to a child in a difficult environment. He believed the appropriate response to uncovering them was not shame but a specific kind of respect, the respect you would give to someone who kept you alive, because they did keep you alive. They kept you connected when connection was the thing you could not afford to lose. They kept you safe in an environment that was not safe. They worked. They worked so well that you carried them all the way here, into the present, where the environment has changed but the strategies have not. And the path forward, in Jung's framework, is not to condemn them and not to simply accept them as permanent. It is to see them clearly enough that the seeing changes something, to understand that the room you are reading is not the room from before, that the connection does not depend on your usefulness in the way it once did, that the intimacy does not carry the same inevitability of loss, that your needs are not, in this present life, the danger they once were. This understanding does not change everything immediately. The nervous system moves slowly. The predictions that were built under conditions of genuine threat do not dissolve in the presence of mere safety. They dissolve in the presence of repeated, sustained, undeniable experience of a different outcome. But the understanding is where it begins, and you have now seen what to look for. Before you go, I want to ask you one thing, and this is important. Of the 5 patterns in this video, reading the room instead of yourself, compulsive usefulness, treating intimacy like a test, being at war with your own needs, and feeling responsible for things you didn't cause, which one landed hardest? Write in the comments. I want to know your answers. And if you thought of someone while watching this, someone who carries these patterns and has never had the language for them, you should definitely share this video with them. Because the most important thing you can do with this recognition is refuse to let it stay private.